This upcoming pattern will completely change our weather for the rest of the year. Let's take a look at the setup going forward, but first take you back at where we've been over the last 30 days on the temperature anomalies. You can see for pretty much good part of the country, they've been above average, especially across the south where the heat has just been relentless. Out west, you've had some cooler conditions. Really, that was compliments of Hillary and all the remnants of the rain that unfolded across the west. Out here in the Great Lakes, overall, you've been more or less kind of just average weather, but we are going to be seeing significant changes ahead. Let's take a look at the setup on the precipitation front for the last 30 days. What sticks out like a sore thumb is in the dry season, they had Hillary come ashore, dumping all that very heavy rain. So obviously you're 500 well above average, what you typically see this time of year. But the middle of the country, yeah, all that red, that's the high and dry. It's been a lot of dry conditions. But out east, it continues to remain on overall the wetter side. So if you are new to the channel and like detailed weather breakdowns, hit the subscribe button and you're in. You get all my daily content on this channel. And I would love to reach 200,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And you can help me get there by subscribing to the channel and follow all my daily updates. So let's take a look at the setup on the big picture on the satellite view. And wow, we've got two beasts out there. One is Hurricane Jova. That's a category 5, folks. This is supposed to mass act to 175 miles an hour. Luckily, this will continue westbound and not affect anybody, but there's Lee also rapidly developing, and this could also be a category 5. So we'll have plenty of time to watch Lee in the trajectory, but yeah, we've got two beasts out there into the Eastern Pacific as well as in the Atlantic. But further inland into the United States, we do have a little bit of a cold front drifting south. And along that cold front, there's going to be some isolated showers and stronger thunderstorms. And some of those could actually turn severe and be damaging winds later on this afternoon into the early evening time frame. So they do actually have a slight risk for severe weather. This is mainly going to be for a high wind of threat, downburst winds across portions of the DC region into Baltimore, back into Philly, those areas extending into upstate New York, getting into Burlington. All these areas could be seeing some 40, likely 60, possibly 65 mile per hour downburst winds later on this afternoon, and some of those stronger scattered cells are going to be over your area. But look at this, folks. This should not be right for this time of year. Yes, that is heat advisories, and yes, that is excessive heat warnings continue to bake across the south. Even in the northeast, out ahead of those storms, you're going to be experiencing those higher dew points and those heat advisories as well. And that's really the recipe why you're seeing some of those stronger severe storms as the atmosphere will overturn this afternoon. But heading into Monday, we're going to start to see the beginning stages of significant changes on the table as the high pressure slowly starts to retreat out of Texas. That will create that what's called northwest flow. It's a cooler flow. It's going to be able to buckle this trough and bring it further south. At the same time, we're going to have to start to see kind of multiple disturbances, subtle disturbances in the higher up levels of the atmosphere actually kind of ring out precipitation across New Mexico, into the panhandle of Texas, back into Oklahoma. That will actually swing into portions of North Texas. There's Lee, could be down to a 925 millibar category 4, if not category 5 hurricane by then, as we're watching this trough come down and pull down some of that colder air. So this is going to be a pretty significant cool front for this time of year, a transition to fall, what we've been looking for. Those areas that experiencing kind of high and dry conditions and those above average temperatures, we'll start to see the temperatures tumble as we start to transition into Monday, Tuesday, and really much of next week. The middle of the country looks to be on the average, if not below average side, as a welcome relief and a retreat from the heat as the high pressure backs off into Mexico. And of course, we'll be watching Lee every step of the way. But it's going to bring some pretty good rains back in the picture across these regions. So with these subtle disturbances are going to be coming across, New Mexico is going to get into the action, eastern, Colorado, back into the Texas panhandle. That will drift into Oklahoma. That will drift possibly even some heavier rains back into portions of North Texas. That'll squeeze play, ring out the atmosphere into Illinois, back into Indiana and Ohio. And then of course there is Lee lurking off the East Coast, but it's plenty far distance off the East Coast. But you're going to be experiencing some pretty heavy rainfall across the Northeast, but with the combination of these troughs that come in, and as Lee gets closer, you're definitely going to be hit with some very heavy rain across New England and especially into Maine as we get deeper into the week. So the setup on Tuesday, wow, it has Lee continuing to rapidly develop. It can continue to, this could be one of the strongest storms we've seen actually in a long time. 911 millibar low pressure. That would be a significant storm. This could be possibly 170 mile per hour, even some models pushing it to 180 miles an hour. So that's why we're definitely watching Lee very closely. But we do have that pretty healthy trough that's going to be digging down, and then we'll have these little multiple disturbances going to be swinging across. So once the transition over unfolds, then we'll actually have multiple disturbances that kind of train over some of these same areas, and as the trough keeps pulling down that cooler air. So you'll continue to warm up across the west, but it's the middle of the country that really sees the effects of the changes ahead, with some much cooler welcome air that reaches all the way down further south, especially Oklahoma, getting into north and central Texas by then. Going into Tuesday, you're experiencing some really nice conditions, but the change will be on Wednesday, and we'll have to watch this closely because this is when Lee is expected to turn, because depends on the strength of this overall trough. This is a pretty significant trough going to be building across the Great Lakes, but we also have a pretty significant ridge at the same time building across over the top. So depending on which one's actually stronger, but it definitely looks like, at least right now, that this trough is going to be pretty significant enough to keep Lee mostly offshore. So we'll watch this closely, and but we're for the time being, we've got some much cooler and nicer conditions to contend with as that trough continues to pull further south. That's going to be replaced with, fall-like temperatures, right? Widespread 70s across the north. Those 70s for highs, folks. Highs back into, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, back into even Arkansas could be seeing some 80s for highs. Even good part of Texas, those are 80s on the map. 107 in Dallas, 109 tomorrow, 86 by next Wednesday. That's a significant change, and it's something they have not seen in a very long time, right? So change is on the table, and there's going to be a lot more rain associated with it, because here's on the precipitous water imagery. You can see the significance of this trough. The brown is your drier air, right? Here's your low pressure across the Great Lakes, but here's your moist conditions across New Mexico. And look at that, Texas, folks. That is, the atmosphere is starting to turn over. You got higher dew points, the humidity starts to creep back. You got subtle disturbances in the causes the air to rise. You've got ringing out the precipitation, plenty of heat in the upper levels, right? So as soon as the atmosphere turns, it's going to be able to ring out that precipitation, and that's exactly what's going to unfold across a good part of Wednesday and especially into Thursday, of course, as we'll be watching Lee. But out ahead of the East Coast, you definitely going to be experiencing some heavier rains with the combination of this significant trough that's going to be moving in. And look what happens on the vorticity map. This thing could bottom out to 170 miles an hour, folks. I mean, that's going to be a serious beast of a storm. I mean, 2 Cat 5s, like possibly at the same time, that's kind of rare. I mean, of course, this is, peak season of a hurricane season. So yes, this is the time where you see probably the strongest activity But luckily for Lee, it looks to remain offshore. We'll still have to watch this from the Carolinas to Maine, especially into Nova Scotia. You got to watch this storm seriously because obviously this is going to be a very potent storm. But further south, these disturbances are going to be ringing up some welcome, rain and cooler conditions funnel south. So going into next week, the change is real, folks. I mean, we've got a pretty significant cooler shot of air drifting down from the Great Lakes. That'll funnel into the Ohio Valley, the middle of the country, and portions of the southern plains, and get into portions of the southeast with those below average temperatures. I mean, this is definitely something you haven't seen. And rain too, right? So very dry across New Mexico, very dry across Oklahoma and Texas, Louisiana. These areas desperately need the rain. So this is going to be a welcome relief, a welcome sight in those areas that have been so drought stricken. And it could even intensify as we go into, say, the 14th, 15th, and the 16th. I mean, when's the last time you saw this heavy precipitation over Oklahoma and Texas? That's something you have not seen in a very long time. And then the transition with the trough coming in and the remnants of what was of Lee, Lee lurking off the coast. It's definitely going to be bringing some heavier rains across, places like New York City, New Jersey, getting into, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, back into especially Maine. Maine looks to get pummeled, and Nova Scotia with some very heavy rain, likely some very high winds. So here's the transition on Friday. So this is, of course, a long ways out. We'll be watching it, but the latest global guidance still hints of this pretty much significant trough as it continues to push further south. So you guys haven't gotten the action yet, like say in South Texas, we'll start getting the rain as well as that cooler air continues to pull further and further south. And then of course there's Lee, and then the heavier rains really start to spread into Maine and New England. Here's the GFS, kind of pulls it the same way, right? So both global guidances, most ensembles, at least right now, continues to push and said, hey, the trough is going to be, stronger than the actual ridge. So that's going to possibly win and keep it offshore, but not offshore enough to still bring heavier rains and very high winds even further north, because these waters are still plenty warm up there. So it could be, I don't know, possibly still a storm, or even possibly an extra tropical storm, by then. Again, this is a long ways out. This is the 16th. That's still 9-10 days out, from now. But, here's the European, kind of the same deal, puts it in the same place, more or less, Maine, Nova Scotia, those areas. So we'll definitely have to watch this closely. But here's the rain, folks. Here's the rain on the latest guidance for the next 10 days. It continues to remain dry out west. You're going to start warming up, and your drier conditions continue for you guys. But it's the middle of the country. It's these disturbances, and these disturbances come across probably some multiple inches of rain over the next 7 to 10 days across, Oklahoma to the Texas Panhandle, portions of North Texas, and that rain, beneficial rain, lighter amounts will at least extend into South Texas, and some of that extends into the Southeast. But of course, where the heavier rains is with the combination of the trough and what's the guidance of Lee, puts the heavier rains across the Northeast, and especially New England, of course, especially Maine and Nova Scotia. And the GFS kind of implies the same way. So both global guidances are on board across the middle of the country, bringing some welcome rains across the southern plains, and then the heavier rains across into the Northeast, while much of the West continues to remain on the drier side. But yeah, once this trend continues, it will continue. So the ridge backs off Monday, but it continues to back off even in the foreseeable future on the ensemble front, saying, hey, it's heading back into Mexico, where it actually came from in June. That's finally going to be retreating. We're going to start to see the transition to fall-like weather, but we're also going to be starting to see the transition to an El Nino. The El Nino finally shows up, right? It's been, probably non-existent, which it typically is in the summertime. But heading into the 20th of the month, we're going to start to see the separation, right? of the jet streams. We got the polar jet to the north, we got the subtropical jet to the south. Pretty evident, right? And this is an El Nino year, so you got cooler air funneling in, northwest flow kicks off the activity. We're probably going to be transitioning to, with these cold shots of air, with more severe weather going to be bringing back onto the table. But the southern jet stream is starting to get more active, and this is going to be even continue to remain more active as we go through September, October, November, and especially as we transition into the winter months. This southern jet stream will continue to get stronger and stronger and stronger. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch my next update while I protect you before and after storm.